The morning sky over New Geneva burned crimson as Admiral Sarah Chun stared at the holographic display floating above her command deck. 3 years had passed since humanity first encountered the Zephyrian Galactic Empire, and what began as cautious first contact had devolved into the most brutal conflict in recorded history. The numbers glowing before her told a story of systematic extermination. 69 billion human lives snuffed out across 17 colonies in the past 72 hours. The Empire hadn't just attacked military targets or strategic installations. They had methodically targeted civilian population centers, schools, hospitals, and residential districts with surgical precision. Admiral, we're receiving the final transmission from Colony 77 Alpha, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, her voice barely steady. The young officer's hands trembled as she worked the communications array. It's going out on all galactic frequencies. They're broadcasting it live. Chun closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had commanded fleets through the Centauri rebellions and survived the Proxima siege, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Zephyrians weren't just killing humans. They were making a spectacle of it. Put it through to the main display, she ordered. The hologram flickered and resolved into a scene that would haunt the survivors for generations. Colony 77 Alpha had been humanity's crown jewel, a terraformed world that housed 12 billion souls. Massive cities with gleaming spires reached toward alien skies, agricultural domes that fed half the outer rim, and research facilities that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. Now it burned. Zephyrian dreadnoughts hung in the atmosphere like metallic thunderclouds, their energy weapons carving precise lines of destruction through the urban landscape. But this wasn't random bombardment, it was choreographed slaughter. The alien ships moved in formation, systematically destroying each city block by block, ensuring maximum suffering before the final killing blow. The transmission came from Dr. Marcus Webb, the colony's chief administrator, broadcasting from an emergency bunker deep beneath the capital city of New Horizon. His face filled the screen, tears streaming down his cheeks as explosions shook the facility around him. To anyone receiving this transmission, Webb began, his voice cracking with emotion, I want the galaxy to witness what the Zephyrian Empire considers justice. They claim we are a plague upon the cosmos, an inferior species that threatens their divine order. They say our expansion into their territory justifies this genocide. The camera shook as another massive detonation rocked the bunker. Warning lights bathed everything in hellish red as automated systems announced hull breaches and radiation leaks. We tried diplomacy, Webb continued. We offered them trade agreements, cultural exchanges, even territorial concessions. But they see us as nothing more than vermin to be exterminated. As I speak, their ships are methodically destroying every human settlement on this world. Not just the cities, the farms, the research stations, even the wildlife preserves where Earth animals roam free under alien stars. Admiral Chun watched in horror as the feed switched to external cameras. Zephyrian ground forces moved through the burning streets in their distinctive blue and silver armor, their energy rifles cutting down, fleeing civilians with mechanical efficiency. Children ran screaming through smoke-filled streets while their parents tried desperately to shield them from the slaughter. The aliens moved with an unsettling grace, their tall, slender forms perfectly adapted for their high-gravity homeworld. Their faces were hidden behind ornate masks that bore the symbols of their various military orders. But their actions spoke louder than any words. They killed methodically, without passion or hatred, as if they were simply following a maintenance protocol. They're not even taking prisoners. Webb's voice came through the static. Every human they find, they execute on the spot. Men, women, children, it doesn't matter. We're all just obstacles to their galactic purity. The transmission cut to a wider view showing the planet from orbit. 67 major population centers burned simultaneously, their death throes visible from space as columns of smoke and flame rose into the atmosphere. The Zephyrian fleet maintained perfect formation, their weapons firing in synchronized pulses that turned entire city districts into molten slag. But what made the scene truly horrifying wasn't just the scale of destruction, it was the precision. Every shot was calculated for maximum psychological impact. Schools were hit during class hours. Hospitals were targeted when they were fullest. Residential areas were struck when families would be gathered for meals. They're not just killing us, Webb realized, his voice filled with dawning horror. They're sending a message to every species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you oppose the Zephyrian Empire. This is what happens when you dare to expand beyond your designated borders. The bunker shook again, more violently this time. Emergency lighting failed, plunging the transmission into near darkness. Webb's face was illuminated only by the glow of his emergency beacon as he continued his final broadcast. "I have a daughter," he whispered into the camera. "Her name is Emily, and she's 8 years old. She loves Earth butterflies and wants to be a xenobiologist when she grows up. She's in Sector 7 with her school group, visiting the Natural History Museum." His voice broke completely. "I can see Sector 7 burning from here." Admiral Chun felt her command crew shift uncomfortably around her. Many of them had children of their own scattered across the colonies. The personal nature of Webb's testimony was hitting them harder than any tactical briefing ever could. The camera suddenly lurched as massive impacts shook the bunker. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as structural supports groaned under the assault. Webb steadied himself against his console and looked directly into the camera one final time. "To any humans receiving this transmission, remember what you've seen here today. The Zephyrians don't want conquest, they want extermination. There can be no peace with them, no negotiation, no surrender. They see us as a cancer to be cut out of the galaxy." The transmission flickered as power systems began failing throughout the bunker. Webb's image became distorted, but his words remained clear. "Tell the Solar Federation Council that their diplomatic overtures are pointless. Tell them that their hopes for a peaceful resolution died with the first child murdered on this world. Tell them." He paused as another explosion rocked the facility. "Tell them that humanity must fight, or humanity will die." The feed switched one final time to an external camera mounted on the bunker surface. The view showed the capital city of New Horizon in its death throes. Magnificent towers that had taken decades to build were being methodically reduced to rubble. The Grand Plaza where humanity had planted its flag on this world was now a crater filled with molten metal and ash. And, through it all, the Zephyrian ships continued their grim work with machine-like precision. No emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. They were conducting what they clearly considered a routine extermination, broadcast live across the galaxy as a warning to any species that might consider challenging their authority. The transmission ended abruptly as the bunker's power systems finally failed. Admiral Chun stared at the blank screen for a long moment, the weight of what she had witnessed settling over her like a physical burden. Around her, the bridge had fallen silent except for the soft hum of life support systems and the distant whisper of hyperspace engines. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rodriguez finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are your orders?" Chin turned to face her crew. These were good people, dedicated officers who had sworn an oath to protect humanity and its interests across the galaxy. They looked to her for leadership, for some sign that their species could survive this onslaught. But how do you fight an enemy that treats genocide as a minor administrative task? "Contact Fleet Command," she ordered, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her chest. "Tell them that diplomatic protocols are hereby suspended. Tell them that the Colonial Defense Fleet requests immediate authorization for unrestricted warfare against all Zephyrian military assets." "Ma'am," her tactical officer interjected, "our current force strength is barely 12% of their fleet numbers. Even with full authorization, we can't match their firepower." Admiral Chun walked to the main view screen and placed her hand against the cool metal. Somewhere out there, across the vast emptiness of space, the Zephyrian Empire was celebrating another successful purification operation. They probably didn't even consider it a real battle, just pest control on a galactic scale. "Lieutenant Commander Torres," she called to her science officer, "how long until our research teams complete the weapons development project?" Torres consulted her display. "The quantum destabilization warheads should be ready for testing within 6 months, Admiral. The new shield harmonics are already showing promise in simulations." "And the special project?" "The one classified above our current clearance level." Torres hesitated. "I can't discuss specifics, ma'am, but I understand it's proceeding ahead of schedule. The research teams on Luna Base have been working around the clock since the attacks on the Rim colonies began. Chen nodded slowly. Humanity had always been at its most dangerous when cornered, and the Zephyrians had just backed them into the ultimate corner. They thought they were dealing with just another primitive species that would crumble under superior firepower. They had no idea what they had awakened. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out urgently. "We're receiving priority transmissions from 17 different colonial sectors. It's happening everywhere. The Zephyrians are hitting every major human settlement simultaneously." The main display filled with incoming reports from across human space. New Tokyo on Kepler, 442b, destroyed. The agricultural worlds of the Perseus arm, burning. The research stations in the Vegas system, silent. Each report brought fresh horrors as the scope of the Zephyrian assault became clear. This wasn't a military campaign. It was an extinction event. "They're not just targeting our colonies," Chief Intelligence Officer Nash reported from her station. "They're hitting refugee ships, medical transports, even civilian evacuation convoys. They're trying to make sure no humans escape to warn the rest of the galaxy." Admiral Chun felt something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. The Zephyrians had made a fundamental error in their calculations. They assumed that humanity would react like every other species they had encountered, with fear, desperation, and ultimately surrender. They didn't understand that humans were different. Humans didn't just fight when cornered. They evolved. "Open a channel to all remaining Colonial Defense Fleet vessels," she ordered. "Full encryption, maximum priority." "Channel open, Admiral." Chen took a deep breath and looked into the camera pickup. Behind her, the bridge crew stood at attention, their faces grim with determination. They understood what was coming next. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the CDF Retribution, broadcasting to all human military assets in the galaxy. As of this moment, the Colonial Defense Fleet considers itself to be in a state of total war with the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. All previous rules of engagement are suspended. All diplomatic protocols are void. All restrictions on weapons development and deployment are lifted." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Across human space, fleet commanders and colonial governors would be receiving this transmission and understanding its implications. The Zephyrians have shown us that they consider humanity to be nothing more than a pest to be eliminated. They have broadcast the murder of 69 billion innocent civilians as a warning to the galaxy. They believe this display of overwhelming force will break our spirit and convince us to surrender or flee. Chen's voice grew harder with each word. They're about to learn that they have made the gravest tactical error in galactic history. Humanity doesn't surrender. We don't flee. When someone tries to exterminate us, we don't just fight back. We make sure they never threaten anyone else ever again. The transmission went out across the quantum communication network, reaching every human vessel and colony in known space. On thousands of worlds and hundreds of star systems, millions of humans heard their Admiral's declaration and understood that everything had changed. The age of diplomatic solutions and measured responses was over. The Zephyrians had chosen genocide, and humanity was about to show them exactly what that choice would cost. 3 months after the Great Broadcast, as historians would later call it, the first human retaliation strikes began. But they weren't the desperate, flailing attacks the Zephyrians expected from a cornered species. They were surgical, calculated, and absolutely terrifying in their precision. Commander Elena Vasquez crouched in the maintenance shaft of Zephyrian Battle Station Omega-7, her enhanced combat suit rendering her nearly invisible to the alien sensors. Around her neck hung a small pendant, a piece of melted metal recovered from the ruins of Colony 77 Alpha, where her brother and his family had died in the broadcast massacre. "Phoenix team, report," she whispered into her comm unit, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. "Phoenix 2 in position at the reactor core," came the reply from Lieutenant Kim. "Charges are set and ready." "Phoenix 3 at the command center," reported Sergeant Martinez. "I can see their leadership council through the ventilation grate. 12 high-ranking officers, including what looks like a sector commander based on his uniform markings." Vasquez checked her chronometer. In 17 minutes, Admiral Chen's task force would emerge from hyperspace and begin their assault on the Zephyrian fleet guarding this system. The battle station would respond by targeting human population centers on the planet below. Standard Zephyrian doctrine was to threaten civilians whenever they encountered military resistance. But this time would be different. "Phoenix 4 here," crackled another voice. "I'm in the communications array. The Zephyrians are preparing to broadcast another execution ceremony. They've got about 10,000 human prisoners lined up in the main hangar bay." Vasquez felt her jaw clench. The Zephyrians had refined their psychological warfare since the Great Broadcast. Now, they made a point of capturing human civilians alive during their raids, saving them for public executions whenever human military forces appear to challenge them. It was an effective tactic that had forced several Colonial Defense Fleet commanders to withdraw rather than risk civilian lives. New priority target, Phoenix 4. Can you access their broadcast systems? Already done, Commander. I'm not just in their communications. I've got complete control of their propaganda network. Every ship in their fleet, every government building on their homeworld, every public screen in their empire is about to receive a very different kind of message. Vasquez smiled grimly. Humanity had learned much about Zephyrian society during 3 months of total war. Their rigid hierarchical structure, their obsession with public displays of power, their belief that psychological warfare was just as important as military supremacy. The aliens had made the mistake of thinking humans would play by their rules. They were wrong. "All teams, execute on my mark," Vasquez commanded as she drew her plasma cutter and began working on the blast door leading to the station's central command hub. "Remember, this isn't just about destroying their infrastructure. We're sending a message that will reach every corner of their empire." The door fell away, silently, and Vasquez slipped into the command center. The Zephyrians were tall, graceful beings with elongated limbs and faces that would have been beautiful if not for the cold intelligence that burned in their large, dark eyes. They moved with the precision of a species that had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. None of them noticed the small human figure dropping from the ceiling behind them. Vasquez landed in a crouch and activated her suit's combat protocols. Time seemed to slow as tactical information flooded her enhanced nervous system. 12 targets, optimal elimination sequence calculated, probability of mission success, 97%. The first Zephyrian turned just in time to see death approaching in the form of a grieving human soldier with nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, 15 light-years away on the planet Zephyros Prime, High Chancellor Vorthe stood before the Grand Assembly and prepared to address the citizens of the Empire. The massive chamber could hold 50,000 beings, and every seat was filled with representatives from conquered worlds throughout their galactic domain. "Citizens of the Eternal Empire," Vorthe began, his voice amplified by the ancient acoustics of the chamber. "Today we gather to witness the final solution to the human problem. Our fleets have successfully eliminated 69 billion of these vermin from the galaxy, and their remaining populations cower in fear of our righteous judgment." The assembly erupted in the rhythmic harmonic sounds that pass for applause among Zephyrians. Vorthe basked in their approval, his ornate robes shimmering under the crystalline light fixtures that hung from the cathedral ceiling. "The humans believed they could challenge our divine mandate to rule the galaxy," he continued. "They thought their primitive weapons and inferior tactics could somehow threaten the civilization that has stood for 10,000 years. Today, we will show them, and any other species foolish enough to oppose us, the true meaning of power." The massive display screens throughout the chamber flickered to life, showing feed from Battle Station Omega 7. Thousands of human prisoners stood in orderly rows in the station's hangar bay, their faces showing the mixture of fear and defiance that Zephyrians had come to associate with this troublesome species. "Behold the last free humans in the Kepler sector," Vorthe announced. "In moments, their pitiful fleet will arrive to attempt a rescue. They will watch as we execute their civilians, and then they will flee in terror as our superior firepower reduces their ships to cosmic dust." But something was wrong with the transmission. Instead of the expected view of terrified human prisoners, the screens now showed the interior of Battle Station Omega 7's command center. And what they saw there sent shock waves through the Zephyrian Empire. Commander Vasquez stood over the bodies of 12 high-ranking Zephyrian officers, her combat suit splattered with alien blood. In her hand, she held the severed head of Sector Commander Vreltov, one of the Empire's most decorated military leaders. "Greetings, citizens of the Zephyrian Empire," she said, looking directly into the camera with eyes that burned with righteous fury. "My name is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Human Colonial Defense Fleet. You probably don't recognize the name, but you should learn it because I represent something new in your galaxy, humanity's answer to your genocide." The Grand Assembly fell silent. 50,000 voices that had been cheering for human extinction moments before now watched in stunned horror as a single human soldier stood triumphant over their military elite. "You murdered 69 billion innocent people and broadcast their deaths across the galaxy," Vasquez continued, her voice carrying clearly through the hijacked communication system. "You thought this would break our spirit. You thought we would surrender or flee in terror. But you made a fundamental error in your calculations." She lifted the sector commander's head higher, making sure every being in the Empire could see it clearly. "You assumed we were like the other species you've conquered. You thought we would follow your rules of warfare, respect your concepts of honor, and accept our designated place in your cosmic hierarchy. But humans don't follow rules when those rules are designed to facilitate our extinction." Behind her, the other members of Phoenix team emerged from the shadows, their forms materializing as they deactivated their stealth systems. Each carried weapons that had never been seen before in galactic warfare, devices that combined human ingenuity with reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology in ways that defied the established conventions of military science. "You want to know what makes humans different from every other species you've encountered?" Vasquez asked. "We don't just adapt to survive, we evolve to dominate. And right now, we're evolving into something specifically designed to end your empire." The transmission switched to exterior views of Battle Station Omega-7, where Admiral Chin's task force had just emerged from hyperspace. But instead of the expected collection of human vessels, the Zephyrian defenders found themselves facing something unprecedented. The human ships had been completely rebuilt during the 3 months since the Great Broadcast. Gone were the conventional hull designs and predictable weapon configurations that had characterized colonial defense fleet vessels. In their place were sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to bend light around them, their surfaces covered in adaptive armor that shifted and flowed like living tissue. "We call this Project Prometheus," Vasquez explained as the Zephyrian fleet struggled to understand what they were seeing. "Named after the human mythological figure who stole fire from the gods. Because that's exactly what we've done. We've stolen your fire, improved upon it, and now we're going to use it to burn your empire to the ground." The first human vessel opened fire, and the energy beam that lanced out was unlike anything seen in galactic warfare. Instead of the crude plasma bolts or laser arrays that most species employed, this weapon seemed to tear reality itself apart, creating cascading failures in the target ship's molecular structure that spread like a virus through its hull. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser Destiny's Edge, a vessel that had participated in the massacre of 7 human colonies, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, erased from reality so completely that even the quantum signatures of its component atoms vanished from the universe. "We learn a lot from studying the ruins of our dead worlds," Vasquez continued as more human ships opened fire, each weapon discharge eliminating another Zephyrian vessel with the same terrifying efficiency. "Your energy weapons leave distinctive quantum fingerprints on their targets. We've been able to trace those fingerprints back to specific ships, specific crews, specific individuals who participated in civilian massacres." The Grand Assembly watched in growing horror as their supposedly invincible fleet was systematically disintegrated by human weapons that operated on principles they couldn't even begin to understand. Ships that had conquered star systems and subjugated entire civilizations were being deleted from existence by a species they had dismissed as primitive vermin. "This is impossible," High Chancellor Vorthicke whispered, but his words were clearly audible in the stunned silence of the chamber. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. They can't. Actually, we can," Vasquez interrupted, somehow having heard his words across the vast distances of space. Because while you're focused on maintaining your technological superiority through incremental improvements, we were completely rethinking the fundamental nature of reality itself. The transmission switched to show the interior of the human flagship, where Admiral Chin stood before a massive holographic display showing the entire Zephyrian Empire. Red markers indicated the locations of every major military installation, government facility, and population center in their territory. For 3 months, you've been hunting down and murdering human civilians while our fleets retreated and our colonies fell silent, Admiral Chin announced. You interpreted our withdrawal as cowardice, our silence as surrender. But what you actually witnessed was humanity consolidating its resources for a single, decisive response. The holographic display zoomed in on specific sectors of Zephyrian space, revealing the true scope of what humanity had been planning. Thousands of human vessels, each equipped with the new reality distortion weapons, were simultaneously emerging from hyperspace at strategic points throughout the Empire. We call this Operation Excision, Chin continued. In medical terms, an excision is the complete surgical removal of a cancerous tumor. That's exactly what we're about to do to your civilization. Back on Battle Station Omega-7, Commander Vasquez had finished her demonstration and was preparing to leave. But first, she had one more message for the Zephyrian Empire. You wanted to send a message when you murdered 69 billion innocent people, she said, looking directly into the camera one final time. Here's our response. Humanity doesn't just fight for survival. We fight for justice. And justice for the great broadcast requires the complete elimination of every being who participated in it, every government that authorized it, and every civilization that celebrated it. She activated a device on her belt, and the transmission began showing quantum signatures scrolling across the screen, billions upon billions of individual energy patterns that represented every Zephyrian who had been present during the various massacres. Our quantum forensics teams have analyzed every broadcast transmission, every weapon discharge, every communication signal from your genocide campaign, Vasquez explained. We know exactly who was involved, from the lowliest soldier who pulled a trigger to the highest government official who gave the orders. Every single one of you. The implications of her words settled over the Grand Assembly like a death shroud. They had committed their crimes in the open, broadcast them proudly across the galaxy, recorded every detail for their historical archives. And now humanity had used that evidence to compile a comprehensive target list. You're all going to die, Vasquez said simply. Not because we're monsters like you, but because justice demands it. The 69 billion innocent people you murdered deserve justice, and we're going to deliver it. The transmission ended abruptly as Phoenix team evacuated the battle station. Moments later, the entire facility vanished in a cascade of quantum fire as Admiral Chin's task force completed its mission and moved on to the next target. Across the Zephyrian Empire, similar scenes were playing out as human strike teams emerged from hiding and human fleets materialized from hyperspace. The beings who had spent 3 months celebrating the extinction of humanity were now watching their own civilization begin to crumble under an assault unlike anything in galactic history. High Chancellor Vorthicay stood frozen in the center of the Grand Assembly, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. The empire that had stood for 10,000 years, that had conquered hundreds of worlds and subjugated thousands of species, was being systematically dismantled by a race they had dismissed as primitive animals. Sound the emergency protocols, he finally managed to whisper, "Contact all fleet commanders. Recall every ship to defend the core worlds." But even as the orders went out, everyone in the chamber understood that it was already too late. Humanity had spent 3 months planning this moment, and they hadn't made their move until they were certain of victory. The age of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire was ending, and the age of human justice was about to begin. The quantum storm that swept through the Zephyrian core systems defied every known law of physics. Dr. Rebecca Thorne watched the phenomenon from the bridge of the research vessel Prometheus, her enhanced neural implants struggling to process the vast amounts of data flooding in from the scanning arrays. "Ma'am," her assistant reported with barely controlled excitement, "the quantum cascade is propagating exactly as the models predicted. Each reality distortion is creating sympathetic resonances in the next target, amplifying the destructive effect exponentially. Thorn nodded grimly. 2 weeks had passed since Operation Excision began, and the results exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just losing territory. It was watching its most fundamental understanding of physics unravel before its eyes. "Status report on the civilian evacuation protocols?" she asked. 87% of non-combatant populations have been successfully relocated to the designated safe zones, came the reply. "Our quantum signature scanners are maintaining their 99.6% accuracy rate in distinguishing between military targets and innocent civilians." That distinction had become crucial as humanity's war machine gained momentum. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had targeted civilians deliberately, the human military was making extraordinary efforts to preserve innocent life, even while dismantling an empire. It was a level of surgical precision that had stunned neutral observers throughout the galaxy. The main view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Chun broadcasting from the flagship Retribution. Behind her, tactical displays showed the current state of the war, a three-dimensional map of Zephyrian space marked with thousands of red indicators representing military assets that had been neutralized. "Fleet command to all vessels," Chun announced. "We've confirmed the successful elimination of the Zephyrian 7th Fleet at the Battle of Rigel Prime. Enemy casualties, 47,000 military personnel. Civilian casualties, 0. The planet's population of 12 billion non-Zephyrian civilians remains unharmed and has been placed under human colonial protection." Dr. Thorne smiled at that last detail. Humanity's approach to conquest was as revolutionary as their weapons technology. Instead of subjugating the Zephyrians' former subjects, they were liberating them and offering them genuine autonomy for the first time in generations. Dozens of species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule were now actively supporting the human war effort. "Ma'am," her sensor technician called out urgently, "we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations from the Zephyrian homeworld. It looks like they're attempting to activate some kind of planetary defense system." Thorne studied the readings with growing concern. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases, ancient, powerful, and completely unknown to human science. "Give me a direct line to Admiral Chun," she ordered. "Priority Alpha." The connection opened immediately. "What do you have for me, Doctor?" "Admiral, we're seeing something new from Zephyros Prime. The energy patterns suggest they're activating technology that predates their recorded history. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing power from the planet's core itself." Chen's expression grew grim. "Could it be a planet-killer weapon?" "Possible, but the quantum resonance is wrong for a traditional superweapon. This feels more like they're trying to tear a hole in reality itself." The implications hung in the air between them. Humanity's quantum weapons operated by manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time, but they were surgical tools compared to whatever the Zephyrians were attempting. If they were willing to risk destroying their own homeworld, they must be truly desperate. "Doctor, I need your honest assessment. If they succeed in activating this system, what are we looking at?" Thorne consulted her data streams one more time before answering. "Best case scenario, they manage to create a localized space-time distortion that destroys our quantum weapons' effectiveness in their immediate area. Worst case, they could destabilize the quantum vacuum of this entire star system. And that means the complete annihilation of everything within 50 light years. Stars, planets, the fundamental particles that make up matter itself. All of it would cease to exist on a quantum level." Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew continued their duties with professional calm, but Thorne could see the tension in their faces. They had all known this war would be costly, but the prospect of the enemy destroying entire star systems rather than accept defeat raised the stakes to an unthinkable level. "How long until they can complete their activation sequence?" Chun finally asked. "At their current energy buildup rate, approximately 6 hours. And how long until our main fleet reaches Zephyros Prime?" 14 hours, ma'am." The math was simple and terrifying. The Zephyrians would have their doomsday weapon online 8 hours before human forces could arrive to stop them. And if Dr. Thorne's calculations were correct, they would use those 8 hours to murder every human in the galaxy along with half the known civilizations in local space. Admiral, came a new voice over the communication channel. It was Commander Vasquez, broadcasting from somewhere in the Zephyrian core systems where she was leading deep reconnaissance missions. I'm currently on the surface of Zephyros Prime, and I can confirm Dr. Thorne's assessment. They're preparing to activate what they call the Final Protocol, a system left behind by their predecessors that was only to be used if their civilization faced complete extinction. How close are you to their activation complex? Close enough to see the entire facility. It's massive, Admiral, built into the planet's core and extending for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. But there's something else you need to know. Vasquez paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that made everyone listening understand the gravity of what she was about to reveal. The system isn't just designed to destroy nearby space. According to their historical records, it's meant to create a quantum cascade that will spread throughout the galaxy, unmaking the fundamental forces that hold reality together. They call it the Great Unbinding, their final gift to a universe that dared to reject their divine authority. Dr. Thorne felt her blood turn cold. A galaxy-wide quantum cascade was theoretically possible, but the energy requirements were so enormous that no known civilization could generate enough power. Unless they're using the planet as fuel, she whispered, understanding flooding through her enhanced neural pathways. They're going to convert the entire mass of Zephyros Prime into pure energy and channel it through their quantum manipulation system. Confirmed, Vasquez reported. I'm seeing massive excavation sites throughout the planet where they've been installing conversion matrices. They're literally going to sacrifice their homeworld and everyone on it to take the rest of the galaxy down with them. Admiral Chun stood silent for a moment, processing the implications. Humanity had fought for justice, for the memory of 69 billion innocent people murdered in cold blood. They had built weapons capable of ending the Zephyrian Empire and freeing hundreds of subjugated species. But now they faced an enemy willing to destroy all existence rather than accept defeat. Commander Vasquez, what's your assessment of their defensive capabilities around the Final Protocol facility? Minimal ground forces, but the facility itself is protected by shields that make our strongest weapons look like toys. They're drawing power directly from the planetary core, which means their defensive barriers are operating on the same scale as the Doomsday weapon itself. So a direct assault is impossible. A conventional assault, yes, but I may have an alternative. The communication channel crackled with interference as Vasquez transmitted detailed tactical data to the fleet. Dr. Thorne watched the information scroll across her displays, her mind racing as she processed what the commander was proposing. You want to infiltrate the facility and manually sabotage their quantum matrix, she said slowly. Commander, the energy levels in that complex would kill you instantly, even with full radiation shielding. Not necessarily, Vasquez replied. Our quantum weapons work by manipulating the same forces they're trying to harness. If I can get close enough to their central control system, I might be able to introduce a feedback loop that turns their own power against them. Admiral Chun studied the tactical projections that were now appearing on her command displays. Vasquez's plan was theoretically sound, but it would require her to penetrate deeper into hostile territory than any human had ever gone. And even if she succeeded, the chance of survival was effectively zero. Commander, I can't order you to undertake a suicide mission. With respect, Admiral, you're not ordering me. I am volunteering. 69 billion people died because the Zephyrians thought they could murder innocents without consequence. I won't let them destroy the entire galaxy to avoid paying for their crimes. Dr. Thorne found herself speaking before she realized she had made a decision. I'm going with her. Doctor, that's not Admiral. Commander Vasquez is a soldier, not a quantum physicist. If she's going to sabotage a system that operates on principles we barely understand, she's going to need technical support. And I'm the only person in the fleet who has studied their quantum manipulation technology closely enough to know how to make it fail catastrophically. The silence stretched for long seconds before Admiral Chun responded. Very well, but you'll have full fleet support for your insertion. Every ship we have will be committed to getting you to that facility. Understood, Admiral. We'll need 12 hours to prepare the specialized equipment and plan our approach. You have 6 hours. After that, their power buildup will be too far advanced for sabotage to be effective. Dr. Thorne felt a strange calm settle over her as she began issuing orders to her research team. They would need portable quantum manipulation devices, radiation shielding that could operate in impossible conditions, and enough specialized equipment to essentially build a new physics laboratory in the heart of an enemy stronghold. As her team scrambled to assemble the necessary gear, she found herself thinking about the children she would never have, the discoveries she would never make, the long life she was about to sacrifice. But those regrets paled beside the knowledge that her actions might save trillions of innocent beings throughout the galaxy. 3 hours later, she stood in the shuttle bay of the Retribution alongside Commander Vasquez, both wearing environmental suits that represented the absolute pinnacle of human protective technology. Around them, the final preparations were being made for what everyone understood would be a one-way mission. "Doctor," Admiral Chun said as she approached them for final mission briefing, "I want you to know that if you succeed, your names will be remembered as long as humanity exists. And if we fail, there won't be anyone left to remember anything," Dr. Thorne replied with a smile. "Don't worry, Admiral. We didn't come this far just to let the universe end on the Zephyrians' terms." The shuttle launch bay doors opened, revealing the swirling quantum storms that now surrounded Zephyros Prime. The planet itself was barely visible through the energy discharges that were tearing space-time apart around it. Getting to the surface would require navigating through conditions that would instantly destroy any conventional spacecraft. "Ready, Commander?" Dr. Thorne asked as they strapped themselves into the experimental insertion craft that had been hastily modified for this mission. "Ready, Doctor. Let's go save the galaxy." The craft launched into the quantum maelstrom surrounding the Zephyrian homeworld, its experimental shielding the only thing standing between them and instant annihilation. Behind them, the human colonial fleet prepared for what might be the final battle of the war, and possibly the final battle in galactic history. Time was running out, and the fate of all existence now rested in the hands of two humans racing toward the heart of an alien doomsday weapon with nothing but courage, determination, and the desperate hope that their understanding of quantum physics was sufficient to save the universe itself. The quantum storm surrounding Zephyros Prime tore at reality itself as Dr. Thorne and Commander Vasquez plunged through layers of distorted space-time toward the planet's surface. Their experimental craft shuddered with each wave of energy that washed over them, its adaptive shielding struggling to maintain coherence in an environment where the basic laws of physics had become negotiable. 30 seconds to impact, Vasquez announced, her hands steady on the controls despite the impossible conditions they were navigating. "The facility's entrance should be directly below us, assuming our quantum navigation systems are still functioning." Dr. Thorne checked her readings for the 100th time in the past minute. The energy signatures coming from the planet's core were unlike anything in recorded science. A fusion of technologies so advanced that they seemed to operate on principles that wouldn't be discovered for another 1,000 years of normal scientific development. "Commander, I'm reading massive structural changes in the planet's quantum matrix. They're not just drawing power from the core, they're actually converting the planet's matter into pure energy and feeding it into their dimensional manipulation system. How long until they reach critical mass?" "At their current conversion rate, approximately 4 hours. But that's not the worst part." Thorne's voice grew grim as she processed the incoming data. "The energy buildup is creating cascading resonances throughout local space. Even if we stop them from activating the final protocol, the quantum instabilities they've already created might be enough to..." The craft lurched violently as they broke through the planet's atmosphere, cutting off her explanation. Below them, the surface of Zephyros Prime had been transformed into something that barely resembled a planetary body. Massive excavation sites stretched to the horizon, each one filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with the rhythm of a dying world's heartbeat. Jesus Vasquez Vispirid. They've turned their entire planet into a weapon. The facility that housed the final protocol was visible from orbit, a colossal complex that extended deep into the planet's mantle, its towers and spires reaching up through the atmosphere like the fingers of a buried giant. Energy discharges arced between the structures in patterns that hurt to look at, as if the very light they emitted was somehow wrong on a fundamental level. Landing zone identified, Vasquez reported. But we've got company. Dr. Thorne looked up from her instruments to see squadron after squadron of Zephyrian aircraft rising to meet them. But these weren't the graceful, efficient fighters they had encountered in previous battles. These craft were twisted, angular things that seemed to bend light around them in impossible ways, their hulls inscribed with symbols that made her eyes water when she tried to focus on them. They're using quantum-enhanced technology, she realized. Those aren't conventional aircraft. They're flying pieces of weaponized spacetime. The first energy beam lanced past their craft, leaving a trail of distorted reality in its wake. Where the beam passed, the very concept of distance seemed to become fluid, making it impossible to judge how close the attack had actually come. "I'm taking us in hard and fast," Vasquez announced, throwing their craft into a diving spiral that should have been impossible given the laws of aerodynamics. "Doctor, I need you to configure our shielding for close-range quantum interference. We're going to have to punch through their perimeter defense grid." Thorne's fingers flew over her controls, modifying their protective systems in real time as the planet's surface rushed up to meet them. Around them, the pursuing Zephyrian fighters were firing weapons that seemed to delete portions of space itself, creating holes in reality that posed a greater threat than any conventional weapon. "Shielding configured for quantum tunnel effect," she reported. "This is completely untested technology, Commander. There's a significant chance that attempting quantum tunneling in these conditions will simply erase us from existence." "What's the alternative?" "We get shot down by fighters that can literally remove us from the timeline." Vasquez grinned fiercely. "Then, let's see if human engineering is better than alien magic." She activated the quantum tunneling system, and reality exploded around them. For a moment that lasted either no time at all or several billion years, Dr. Thorne experienced existence from the perspective of a particle that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. She was aware of herself as a wave function spread across infinite possibilities, each one representing a different outcome for their mission. In some realities, they died instantly as the tunneling system failed. In others, they succeeded beyond their wildest hopes and saved not just the galaxy, but all of existence. Most commonly, they arrived at their destination but died in the attempt to sabotage the final protocol, their sacrifice buying enough time for the human fleet to arrive and finish the job. Then, the moment ended, and they were crashing through the roof of a crystalline structure that towered several kilometers above the planet's tortured surface. Emergency systems screamed warnings as their craft tumbled through layers of alien architecture, each impact sending shockwaves through quantum fields that had been carefully tuned for the past several hours. "We're down," Vasquez reported, checking her systems for damage. "Craft is a total loss, but we're alive, and the mission equipment is intact." Dr. Thorne struggled out of her crash harness and began gathering the specialized tools they would need for their assault on the facility's central control systems. Around them, the interior of the Zephyrian complex hummed with power that she could feel in her bones, a deep, thrumming vibration that suggested energies on the scale of stellar formation. "Reading massive quantum field density throughout this structure," she reported. "The entire facility is essentially one enormous quantum computer, with each component linked to every other component through dimensional folding that I don't even have words to describe." "Can you sabotage it?" "I think so, but it's going to require getting to the central processing core. According to my scans, that's approximately 12 kilometers straight down at the exact center of the planetary mass conversion system." Vasquez checked her weapons and ammunition supplies. "Then we'd better get moving. We've got maybe 3.5 hours before they reach activation threshold, and I'm betting this place is going to be crawling with guards." They moved deeper into the facility, following corridors that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. The walls were covered in equations and diagrams that made Dr. Thorne's enhanced neural implants struggle to process them, mathematical concepts that described the manipulation of forces that existed outside normal spacetime. "Commander," she said softly as they navigated a particularly complex intersection, "I think I'm beginning to understand what the Zephyrians actually are." "Explain." "They're not just another spacefaring species that developed advanced technology. They're the remnants of a civilization that existed during the universe's previous iteration. When the cosmos collapsed and was reborn in the Big Bang, somehow they managed to preserve themselves and their knowledge through the transition. Vasquez paused in her advance. Are you telling me we're fighting beings who are older than the universe itself? That would explain their technology, their sense of divine authority over other species, and their willingness to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. From their perspective, they've already watched one universe die. They have the knowledge and power to survive the death of this one too. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just fighting an advanced alien empire. They were battling beings who viewed the current universe as a temporary inconvenience, something to be discarded and replaced when it no longer served their purposes. That makes what we're doing even more important, Vasquez said grimly. If they're capable of surviving universal collapse, then stopping them here might be the only chance any species will ever have of living free. They continued deeper into the facility, encountering defensive systems that defied description. Energy barriers that existed only when observed, guardian constructs that moved through dimensions perpendicular to normal space, and weapons that fired bullets made of crystallized time itself. But for every impossible defense the Zephyrians had created, human ingenuity found a way around it. Vasquez's military training adapted to combat conditions that no Earthborn soldier had ever imagined, while Dr. Thorne's scientific knowledge allowed her to predict and counter quantum effects that should have been beyond mortal comprehension. After 2 hours of fighting through defenses that redefined the concept of warfare, they finally reached the central control chamber. The room was vast beyond description, a spherical space that seemed to exist at the intersection of multiple realities, its walls covered in control systems that extended into dimensions that human eyes couldn't properly perceive. At the center of it all sat High Chancellor Vorth A.K. himself, connected to the facility's quantum matrix through crystalline interfaces that had been grafted directly into his neural system. His consciousness was spread across the entire planetary conversion system, his mind serving as the final control mechanism for humanity's destruction. Humans, he said without opening his eyes, his voice echoing through dimensions that had no names. I wondered if any of you would be clever enough to reach this place. It changes nothing, of course. The great unbinding has already begun. Dr. Thorne checked her instruments and felt her heart sink. He was right. The quantum cascade had already started, reality unraveling in an expanding sphere that would eventually consume the entire galaxy. Their mission had been to prevent activation of the final protocol, but they had arrived too late. Perhaps, she said, connecting her equipment to the nearest interface port. But there's something you didn't account for in your calculations. Impossible. I have considered every variable, every potential outcome. Your species lacks the knowledge necessary to understand what you're facing. You're absolutely right, Dr. Thorne agreed as she began uploading a virus into the facility's quantum matrix. We don't understand your technology well enough to fight it directly. So instead, we're going to do something typically human, which is... Commander Vasquez smiled grimly as she placed charges at key structural points throughout the control chamber. We're going to break your toys so badly that nobody can use them. The virus that Dr. Thorne had created wasn't designed to stop the quantum cascade. That was already impossible. Instead, it would corrupt the mathematical principles that govern the cascade's expansion, turning the carefully controlled universal destruction into chaotic, self-limiting explosions that would burn themselves out before reaching beyond the local star system. You cannot, Vorth A.K. screamed as he felt the virus spreading through the quantum matrix. You're destroying the work of eons, the accumulated knowledge of 1 billion years. Good, Vasquez replied, activating the demolition charges. Maybe the next universe will be better off without it. The explosions tore through the control chamber as the corrupted quantum cascade began feeding back into the facility's power systems. Dr. Thorne and Commander Vasquez stood together in the heart of the destruction, watching as the technology of gods unraveled around them. The last thing Dr. Thorne saw before the facility collapsed was High Chancellor Vorth A.K.'s face, twisted with the recognition that beings he had considered primitive animals had just outwitted a civilization older than the universe itself. Humanity had won, but the victory would come at a cost that was only now becoming clear. 6 months after the destruction of Zephyros Prime, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the memorial chamber aboard the flagship Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing the faces of the 69 billion humans who had died in the Great Broadcast. The images rotated slowly, each face visible for exactly 3 seconds, a rotation that would take 47 years to complete. She paused before the display, showing Dr. Rebecca Thorne and Commander Elena Vasquez, their final transmissions still echoing in her mind. The two women had died, saving the galaxy from universal annihilation, their sacrifice turning certain extinction into the salvation of trillions of lives across hundreds of species. "Admiral," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Captain Lu Wei, her new chief of staff, holding a datapad with the day's briefings. "The Galactic Council is ready for your address." Chen nodded and straightened her uniform. Today marked the official end of the war and the beginning of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. The ceremony would be broadcast to every inhabited world in known space, watched by beings who had spent the past months learning to see humanity in a very different light. She walked to the main briefing room, where representatives from over 300 species waited in various forms of suspended animation fields, holographic projections, and environmental suits. The diversity was staggering. Beings of gas and crystal, energy and flesh, minds that thought in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, and consciousnesses that existed as pure mathematical equations. "Honored representatives," Chen began, her words automatically translated into 700 different languages and communication methods. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire committed an act of genocide against humanity that shocked the civilized galaxy. Today, we gather to discuss the aftermath of our response and the future of our shared space. She activated the main display, showing a three-dimensional map of what had once been Zephyrian territory. Where dozens of star systems had once housed the infrastructure of galactic oppression, there was now nothing. Not empty space, but actual voids where space-time itself had been so thoroughly disrupted that it might take millennia for reality to reassert itself. "The Zephyrian Empire is gone," Chun continued. "Not defeated, not conquered, but completely erased from existence. Every military installation, every government facility, every individual who participated in the genocide campaign against humanity has been eliminated with quantum precision that left no survivors and no possibility of revival." A low murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Many of them had suffered under Zephyrian rule for centuries, and the news that their oppressors were truly and permanently gone was still difficult to process. However, Chun continued, "Our war was never about conquest or revenge. It was about justice for 69 billion innocent people and ensuring that such an atrocity could never happen again. With that goal achieved, humanity now faces a choice about our role in the galaxy going forward." She gestured to another section of the display, showing the current deployment of human forces throughout known space. The Colonial Defense Fleet had grown from a few dozen ships to the largest military force in galactic history, equipped with weapons that operated on principles most species couldn't even comprehend. Some of you have requested that humanity assume the role of galactic peacekeepers, using our military capabilities to enforce order and prevent conflicts between species. Others have suggested that we should withdraw to our own territory and limit our involvement in galactic affairs. Both positions have merit, but they miss the fundamental lesson of our recent conflict. Chun paused, allowing her words to be fully translated and processed by the diverse audience. When she continued, her voice carried the weight of someone who had watched genocide unfold and then orchestrated the complete extinction of those responsible. The Zephyrians believed that superior military force gave them the right to determine which species lived and which species died. They saw themselves as the natural rulers of the galaxy, destined by their advanced technology and ancient knowledge to impose their will upon all other forms of life. She turned to face the assembled representatives directly. Humanity could easily fall into the same trap. Our weapons are more advanced than anything the Zephyrians ever developed. Our understanding of quantum mechanics and dimensional manipulation exceeds theirs by orders of magnitude. We could impose our will upon the galaxy and call it peace. The tension in the room was palpable. Every representative understood the implication. Humanity now possessed the power to become exactly what the Zephyrians had been, only worse. But that's not who we are, Chen declared firmly. The war we fought was not about proving human superiority. It was about demonstrating that some actions will always have consequences, no matter how powerful the perpetrator believes themselves to be. She activated a new section of the display, showing plans that have been developed by human scientists and engineers over the past months. Instead of weapons or military installations, the images showed schools, hospitals, research facilities, and transportation networks designed to connect distant worlds. Humanity proposes a different path forward. Rather than becoming galactic rulers or retreating into isolation, we offer to serve as the galaxy's immune system. We will maintain our military capabilities, not to impose our will, but to ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between submission and extinction. The proposal that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Humanity would establish monitoring stations throughout known space, equipped with quantum sensors capable of detecting the early signs of genocide or species-wide oppression. When such activities were identified, human forces would respond with overwhelming force, but their goal would be surgical elimination of the perpetrators rather than territorial conquest. We call this the Prometheus Protocol, Chen explained, named for the mythological figure who gave fire to humanity, knowing that such knowledge comes with great responsibility. We are offering to share our advanced technology with any species that commits to using it only for defensive purposes and the protection of sentient life. The questions that followed were predictable. How could the galaxy trust humanity not to abuse their power? What guarantees existed that humans wouldn't become the very threat they claimed to oppose? How could any species feel secure knowing that their continued existence depended on human goodwill? These are valid concerns, Chen acknowledged, which is why the Prometheus Protocol includes provisions for oversight by a council of representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Human military actions will be subject to review, and any species that believes we have overstepped our authority will have the right to call for investigation and sanctions. But the real answer to their fears lay in humanity's recent history. The complete destruction of the Zephyrian Empire had demonstrated human capabilities beyond any possible doubt. If they wanted to conquer the galaxy, there was nothing that could stop them. The fact that they were instead offering partnership and protection spoke to motivations that transcended simple power accumulation. There is one more thing, Chan said as the formal session drew to a close. The human species wishes to establish a permanent memorial to the 69 billion civilians who died in the Great Broadcast. But we don't want this memorial to be exclusively human. The display changed one final time, showing plans for a massive space station to be constructed at the edge of the former Zephyrian core systems. The design was breathtaking, a crystalline structure that would house archives, libraries, and memorial chambers dedicated to preserving the memory of every being who had died under oppressive regimes throughout galactic history. We propose the creation of the Memorial of the Lost, Chen explained, a place where the stories of all victims of genocide, oppression, and systematic murder will be preserved forever. Not just humans, but every species that has suffered under the rule of those who believed might made right. The symbolism was powerful and unmistakable. Humanity was using their newfound dominance not to glorify their own achievements, but to ensure that the victims of tyranny throughout history would never be forgotten. As the representatives began to file out, discussing the implications of humanity's proposals in hundreds of different languages, Chen remained behind to watch the memorial displays continue their eternal rotation. Somewhere in that endless cycle, the faces of Dr. Thorne and Commander Vasquez would appear again, reminders of the price that had been paid for galactic freedom. Admiral, Captain Liu said softly, the construction teams are ready to begin work on the memorial. They're requesting final authorization to proceed. Granted, Chen replied without hesitation. And Captain, make sure there's a special section dedicated to the Zephyrian civilians who died when their leaders chose mutual destruction over peaceful surrender. They were victims too, in their own way. Liu nodded and departed, leaving Chun alone with the rotating faces of the dead. The war was over, the galaxy was free, and humanity had stepped into a role they had never sought but could no longer avoid. They were the inheritors of power beyond imagination, the guardians of a peace purchased with blood and sacrifice. But perhaps most importantly, they were the keepers of memory, ensuring that the 69 billion who had died in the Great Broadcast would serve as an eternal reminder that some lines must never be crossed, regardless of the consequences. The age of the Zephyrian Empire was over. The age of human responsibility had begun. And, across the galaxy, trillions of beings slept safely under the protection of a species that had learned the difference between power and justice, between might and right. In the depths of space, construction began on the Memorial of the Lost, its quantum-enhanced archives designed to preserve their stories until the heat death of the universe itself. The dead would be remembered, the living would be protected, and never again would the galaxy witness the kind of systematic slaughter that had sparked humanity's terrible and necessary war. The 69 billion had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had awakened something in humanity that would stand guard over the galaxy for as long as human civilization endured. Justice had been served, and the price of that justice would never be forgotten.